We're broadcasting now.
All right. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. It being 6 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. This is our 7th in our series of budget hearings for the Committee of Ways and Means. All votes will be by roll call. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Any members of the public who are in attendance and have questions, please email the town council. You can get our email off the website, towncouncil@braintreema.gov. Also, there will be a public hearing on June 2nd, beginning at 7 p.m. When the public will be welcome to ask questions then as well. So with that being said, roll call, Clerk Semino.
Councilor Baraka.
Here.
Councilor Connors.
Here.
Councilor Flaherty.
Here.
Councilor Ryan.
Here.
Councilor Sasha.
Here.
All present.
Excellent. All right, thank you. We have no approval of minutes this evening, and we have no old business. So with that, we can jump right into our new business, which is 20038, Mayor FY 2021 operating budget, or take up any action relative thereto. Is there a motion to take this off the table, order 20038?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Baraka.
Yes.
Councilor Connors.
Donna, you're muted.
Sorry.
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty.
Yes.
Councilor Ryan.
Aye.
Councilor Sasha.
Yes.
All in favor.
Thank you. That is unanimous. Tonight, we are going to be reviewing the town's education budget. And before we get started, I do want to make sure on behalf of the committee, I thank Dr. Hackett and members of the school committee for putting this budget together. Normally a huge undertaking. This year, I can only imagine the stress and strain everyone was under in trying to formulate our upcoming school year budget, and gratitude and appreciation all the way around to your teams for presenting this to us tonight. So with that being said, Nicole, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. This evening, we present for your consideration the final budget as part of the town's FY21 submission, and we're going to go out with a bang with our biggest budget of the whole. Under the great direction and leadership provided by Dr. Frank Hackett and his administrative team, I am so confident when I say that the education that our students are getting here in the town of Braintree is absolutely one of the best, if not the best, that they can get here in the Commonwealth. They are incredible year-round, but they have truly stepped up in a variety of ways since the closures back in March due to COVID-19. Some of the items I just want to highlight are the continued provision of breakfast and lunch to our students available for pickup throughout the entirety of the closure. Some of the great online resources that they've provided. I can say I don't have kids in the district here, but I have truly enjoyed getting to know some of our school administrative staff through the videos that they are providing to give their students a little bit of that feeling of continued contact, even though they're not coming into the building, and the incredible strides that our school district made to make sure that all of our students have the necessary technology to continue receiving the education that they have grown accustomed to and truly deserve as residents of this great community. With that, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Dr. Hackett for further presentation of the school district budget.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, and thank you for the kind introduction. It's like she's off in the side wing here, and she's introducing me. It's a little bit like a talk show. I appreciate you having us here this evening, and I trust that you all were able to spend a little time with the answers to the questions as best that we could put them together. They were coming in fast and furious, and I really appreciate the questions because it's just so much easier to have a sense for the information that you're looking for as opposed to coming into a meeting and not really knowing what's going to get asked, and you know, it's just easier to prepare, obviously. So I would like to mention that School Committee Chairman Tom Devon is with us this evening as well, as is George Kokoris, who is the chairman of the Finance and Operations Budget Subcommittee. I did spend a little bit of time in my memo to you, kind of discussing the fact that obviously this budget is, or our department is different than other departments, than most other departments anyway. We do have an elected body that has both fiscal and legal responsibility for the school system. Our budget process starts in about November and in earnest around December into the beginning of the new year. Our budget comes up from principals, from directors, from teachers, and then comes to the central office. We spend a lot of time as administrative group leadership team. And then we spend a lot of time with the Finance and Operations Subcommittee, who vets this our process all the way through. So we have, we've started with one number, we end with another number. I would like to thank the mayor and the mayor's office. Thank Nicole for her support and working with us to make sure that we can get to a number that is supportive of not only the children of the town of Braintree, but we are a department of the town and we have a responsibility. We understand fully that there is really, in the end, there's one pot of money and we all need to work within it. So with that, I don't know if either Mr. Devon or Mr. Kokoris would like to say anything. If not, I will just launch into what we have prepared for you this evening. This is wait time. I'm not very good at it.
Thanks, Dr. Hackett. No, I think, you're going to present a good overview of the process and what we discussed and what we have before you.
I will just go into the presentation for this evening. So this was part of your packet that you received from me earlier. I have added a few additional slides just really to kind of adjust for some of the questions that you had asked. And I won't spend a tremendous amount of time going through every single slide. You have the packet. You can ask me questions along the way or afterward, however you want to handle it. We don't need to spend 20 minutes on every slide. So we start always talking about our enrollment. One of the biggest factors for us in terms of the development of our budget is the number of students we have in front of us. Obviously, our budget is pretty much 85% staffing, to all the way up through. We have maybe about 5 to 10% are kind of costs that are a little bit more controllable, and the remainder are fixed costs related to facilities, utilities, and just operation, transportation, those items to run the school department. This graph just takes a look at where we've been and where we are currently. You can see that there was a pretty steep increase, steady but steep increase in enrollment from 2009 to currently. These are October 1 numbers, which is the official count for the state when we submit our enrollment to receive our subsidy. We are, as you can see, dropping off a little bit. That is expected. The enrollment projections that we have currently, we are expecting to pretty much level off. Now, obviously anything can happen, it's hard to really project what incoming enrollment is going to look like. That is not for students who are not born here, for students who move into town, and you all know that we get quite a few. So those numbers can change, but the projections would tell us that we are leveling off. This is an enrollment by grade span. The top line is all of our elementary schools. That's where you can see part of that dip represented. We are seeing smaller class sizes. We do have a bubble right now that's in 5th, 6th, 7th, and kind of 8th grade. Those are our higher class sizes. And you can see as you look down below at the green bar is the high school. You can see an uptick in enrollment at the high school as that group comes up through. And also at the middle school, not a significant increase, but definitely an increase. So the challenge we have is that the decrease at the elementary level doesn't necessarily provide us resources or teaching positions that we can bring up into middle school and then onto the high school. And I'm talking about, the actual just positions, because we still need the majority of those positions at the elementary level because we're just not dropping off in our enrollment fast enough. We have been able to take a reduction going into next year because of a little bit of a dip at the Liberty Elementary School, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And this final graph just gives you a sense of each school. And, we've talked about this before, that we do have both at Ross and at Flaherty, the bottom two graphs, a fairly significant drop off in enrollment. And we continue to keep an eye on that. We have to think about how we continue to make sure that we are maximizing the usage of all of our buildings. And then you can see also Liberty kind of at the top enrollment, and that significant drop from 2017 to 2019 represents when we implemented our flexible boundaries policy that brought students from Liberty, new incoming students to Hollis. That has helped us a tremendous amount because Liberty was really starting to burst at the seams. We were actually having conversations about whether we needed to add modular units, and with this policy, we've been able to control that growth, with the idea being that we're going to be going into at least one new middle school and hopefully a second within a few years. This I always show because I just think it's important for us to understand that our community is changing, our needs are changing, our demographics are changing. You can see, and I always just go to the biggest change on this chart is the percentage of our students who are white in 1997-98 school year at 93.5% to current year, again, October 1 enrollment at 67.2%. That change means a lot of things for us, from adjusting our curriculum to adjusting our resources, and as importantly, to making sure that we are taking care of our students whose first language is not English. And that's what this chart shows by school. It gives you the number of students who are English language learners. You can see from 2015-16 school year, we were at 228 students for whom English was not their first language. We have gone to this current school year of 339 students. The drop from 18-19 to 19-20 represents the students we received from Puerto Rico during the hurricane. They were here that year and since left. So a fairly big change in our demographic, which has implications for us in terms of resources. You can kind of see in general, the distribution of that, of the numbers is pretty even across the board. All of our schools are somewhat, have had to add programming or staffing in part or whole to make sure that students receive the services they need to access their education. I won't spend time on this. It's just a comparison between our English language learners and of the state. You will see that the fourth column over percent BPS first language, not English, that has grown significantly. So the gap between where we were between the state and us in 2013 was around 10 percentage points. In 2020, it's narrowed significantly from 18.4% for us with a state average of 23%. So I just want to look at backwards for FY 18, 19, and 20 to show a little bit about what we've done and the kinds of adjustments we've made based on the demographic information I just showed you, based on enrollment and based on other needs, and including trying to improve program. In 2018, you can see these are the additions that were made to the budget. The majority of these are related, and this is a little bit of a theme through the fiscal years that we will go through. The majority of these have been to create in-district special education programs. So, for example, the ABLES classroom is a classroom that we have itself, though that classroom is for students who are coming up from a district-wide program at the Flaherty Elementary School. We did not have a program at the middle school. The issue becomes, if we don't have a program, then we're in a situation where students would need to be sent to a collaborative. We've worked very hard to build capacity within the school system because we believe it's the right thing to do to keep our students who are in Braintree, in the Braintree schools with their friends and in their neighborhoods. So we're very fortunate to have talented staff, but as you can see, there is obviously a cost to building a program. Now, I would just say that a collaborative placement for any one student can range from $60,000 to $70,000 per year. Residential placements can range, can go upwards of $350,000 a year for one student. So our ability to keep our students in district and build capacity with our own programs and our own people is not only the right thing to do for our students and for our families, but it also does certainly, there's an economy of scale to it. It's certainly much less expensive to have our own programs than to have students have to go to collaborative placements. Again, a little bit of the same story. We added a Strives teacher, which was an existing program at the high school. We were able to also add a guidance counselor at the high school, which came directly out of the NEASC study that had happened before, but we also knew and had been trying to add that position for several years. The caseload at the time was 315 to 1. The recommended caseloads is 260 to 1, which is what this counseling position brought us to. Much more manageable and certainly critically important for students, both for social emotional reasons, but also for as they continue through their high school education to try to figure out what they're going to do next, whether it's career college or military. We also added a biology teacher to the high school in this budget year. And then FY20, the year that we're in, again, we added our postgraduate special education program for students who have really essentially aged out of the high school. This is a program that works to transition students into the community, into the workforce, provide them with the skills that they're going to need to become young adults. So that was a tremendous program, already built. As you may know, it's over on Pond Street. We worked with the town's facilities department to put that space together, and it's just worked out so well for us. We're very fortunate to have had that space to go to. We made some additional ads at additional ad at South Middle School. That was enrollment driven. High school, we added a mathematics teacher, again, enrollment driven as that population growth started coming up through. And then we also added a facilities manager position. This position was created by reduction of 2 positions. We had a retirement of a administrative assistant who had been with us for quite a while, was top of the scale. And we had another staffing change for a different reason. We took those funds, created the facilities manager position, and actually saved money in the end of that restructuring. The facilities manager is also our asbestos compliance person. They are both licensed to be able to remove asbestos materials, but they also are in charge of our ERA books, which identifies where all of our asbestos is, what kind of condition it's in, and if and when we have to make decisions to remove certain asbestos from certain areas of the building. We'll say that for the most part, the last 5 years, we have done a very good job getting rid of asbestos that is not in good condition. As a general rule, asbestos in and of itself is not a bad thing as long as it's encapsulated. We still have floor tiles, for example, in Morrison that are asbestos containing, but they are in tremendous shape. So the issue becomes when they start to break up and start to get frayed that we have to obviously address that. So the position also is in charge of our custodians, including making visits to our buildings to look at night shifts and see how things are going, to organize schedules, to organize resources. It's a position we've needed for a long time in the school department. We have a lot of square footage, and to have someone who actually is in charge of our maintenance people and our custodians has been sorely missing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of our facilities due usage. So the recommended budget for FY21. Just to define a couple of things, because we're a little different, and I'm sure that you get language from every department that looks a little different. For us, and you will see it in the line item that I provided, when you see contractual steps and lanes, all of our teaching staff, I'll just start there, and some of our Unit B administrators are part of the BEA, and the contract contains steps and what we call steps and lanes or steps and columns. Steps are based on the number of years experience you have. We have 11 steps within the contract. And then lanes are based on degrees. So if you are a bachelor's 1 fresh out of your degree program, then you are a B1 bachelor's 1, you'd be placed on the step B1. If you're a master's 1, you slide over to that lane within the master's column. We also have a few in between lanes, such as master's plus 15, and I believe master's plus 30. We have added a doctoral lane in this current, going into next year. We do believe in making sure that our teachers continue on with their own education. We've got some obviously great people. We've got some people who are already talking about moving on to work on their doctoral program. So we're excited about that. It definitely makes a difference for our students in the instruction in the classroom. The content area director's budget, you'll see that district-wide, DW, the content area directors split $550,000 per year. And that includes all the money for all the instructional materials, K through 12. When I first arrived, they would put together their budget books. And as I was talking to them about how can we make the process better, what I was learning was that it was very rare that they got their wish list. They really never knew for sure exactly what they were going to get for money by department. So we changed the model. We basically tell them, under the direction of the assistant superintendent, Mr. Lee, they have $550,000. They go into a steel cage with Mr. Lee, and then they fight over it. They don't actually. They work very closely together, and it's really changed the dynamic, because how we tell them to think about it is, think about the 550 over a 3-year period. So if you know you're going to need to implement something in year 2 of that 3-year period, have that conversation with your colleagues. And what we see is that our directors, some of them will step back off of something and say, I can do this later. I don't need to do it next year because I know that you have this need. So it's built certainly a more collaborative environment for our directors. I will say candidly, $550,000 for all instructional materials for almost 6,000 students is not a lot of money, but we, I believe, do very, very well with it. And that's because we've got great people. And then the ESCO project, I did put some slides in here from the presentation that I sent you. There were some questions regarding the ESCO project, and I thought it might make sense just to pull some of that out into the slides. I don't imagine that I probably answered all the questions, but wanted just to spend a little bit of time on it. Historically, the school department has been very fortunate and has been supported by the town. I think we do, as a town, understand and appreciate and support education. I think that there is a real feeling that, when we have new people move into our community, we often hear that they've moved here because of the school system. And, it's not obviously just the school system. This community is very welcoming location. There's, a good business sector. There's an incredible spirit within this community of supporting. And but we are, as a school department, very proud of the fact that people do make that decision to come here based on what we do within the school department. And this town has really always supported us very well. So this just shows over a period of time from the FY14 to FY21, the current budget year, or next budget year. It shows our Chapter 70 funding year over year. It shows the dollar change in that funding, and you can see some fairly wild fluctuations in different years. And then the percent that change represents, so year over year. Generally, we generally are going to be around 2.5%. I mean, a little, between 2 and 3 in our funding. FY17 was a different situation, but then you can see the total school budget dollar amounts, the dollar change, and then the percent change. This actually is this year, other than in FY16, when we had a decent bump in Chapter 70. is one of the lowest budget percentages that we have come in at. Then the town allocation, the dollar allocation from the town change, and then the percent that represents. So I just wanted to give you a little historical look at how the funding has looked over the last several years. I'm happy to stop at any point. So I'm just looking for Madam Chair to let me know if you want me to stop.
I would say, Dr. Hackett, thank you. I think, why don't you run through the entire presentation and then we'll get to questions at the end if that's acceptable. That it makes it a little easier to manage in between too.
So unbeknownst to me, Nicole turned off her speaker, so I didn't hear any of what you just said. And I thought your mic was off. I think your mic's off. Could you just repeat that?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I was saying, if you want to run through your entire presentation, we'll hold our questions. We can take
Perfect.
notes as we go. It makes it a little easier to manage, and then we
Absolutely.
can hear everything. Thank you.
Okay, I just, I do get tired of hearing myself talk, so, and I can only imagine how you feel. FY20 current budget was $70,628,795. We started this process in January with a level service, just a rollover budget. That budget truly is just, we take what we're doing, roll everything over, adjust for steps and lanes for contracts, but it's very rough, and it just gives us that starting point as to, what does it look like when we just do that and we don't go through and, do the next pieces of work to prioritize and think about changes that we want to make and need to make. That budget came in at 4.47%. The first budget that we presented to the Finance and Operations Subcommittee, well, we shared the level service, but the first budget that we really had discussions on and started the discussions in earnest was a preliminary draft budget of 3.95%. And then today in front of you now, we have a recommended budget, which has been adopted by the school committee for recommendation to Mayor Kokoris, and then on to you, of 3.67%. What I want to show you in the next slides is how we went from the 4.47% level service budget to the 3.67% recommended budget. So we had to make several adjustments to the level service with several additions that we had to make. These are both contractual and programmatic. The first and biggest one of all is the fact that we will be bringing the fifth graders up to East Middle School next year. And that will mean that East Middle School in the first year will be at one of its highest enrollments that it will realize over the next several years. We'll be knocking on the door of about 1,100 students. We're around 780 or so right now. So that is a fairly significant increase. And if you remember, it's the fifth grade coming in from Flaherty, Ross, Morrison, and Hollis. So with that comes some staffing needs to make sure that we are providing level of service to those students that we need to provide. Obviously, there were impacts of moving fifth grade and fifth grade teachers and fifth grade programs to the middle school that obviously helps clearly. I just want to say that, the directors and Assistant Superintendent Lee have spent, and with me, and we've spent years, the last couple of years, working on curriculum, working on staffing, working on our 5-6 academy, school within a school model with a 5-6 and a 7-8. There's been just a tremendous amount of thought and tremendous amount of work. We're very excited about what we have to offer when we open the doors on the completed East Middle School. I won't go through the other pieces of this that generally are contractual. We can certainly come back at any point if you'd like to discuss, but I will talk a little bit about and just break out the staffing needs at East Middle School. There really isn't any question that we're going to need an additional assistant principal, not only an additional assistant principal, but probably rollerblades for the principal and the 2 assistants. That building is 150,000 square feet almost, and there's a lot of kids in a lot of different places. And for the safety and security of our students, to make sure we're providing the structure that's needed, family contacts, managing issues. There's just no question in a school of 1,100 students that we would need to have 2 assistant principals. That would also fall in line with national guidelines in terms of ratios. We definitely need an additional guidance counselor for all the same reasons. We need to make sure that particularly, well, at any age, but middle years are, I was a middle school teacher, I was a middle school principal, and I love middle school, but It was every day was different because you didn't know how they were going to walk in the door or if they were going to walk in the door. You certainly didn't always know what they're going to smell like. So having a guidance counselor is important to protect the social emotional needs that our students have, and I think we know and how much that plays into the overall educational process for students, especially in today. We need to add 2 custodians. We definitely want to make sure that asset of that building is clean and protected. And we really could probably be looking at 3 or 4 instead of 2, but we believe this is a really good starting point. We've also been able to purchase new equipment within the building project itself. So, we will be more efficient with our cleaning. And then other positions that you see below are kind of impacted by we're doing at the elementary level. So we share teachers in art, we share teachers in music, and we share teachers in PE at the elementary level. Bringing the 5th graders up doesn't necessarily equate to us being able to, we still need some of those positions to provide those content areas and specials to our elementary level students. So these are kind of the pieces that we need to fill out in order to run the East Middle School schedule and maintain the level of programming at the elementary level. So again, the total add is $567,258. Of that, $333,454 is East. And then obviously if we're adding and we're trying to go from 4.47 to 3.67, there have to be reductions. So in total, we reduced from the level service $1,105,872, understanding that we did add to address the needs that we have coming up for next year. Of that money, just quickly, the reductions that we made, we had a director of personnel and student services position within Colbert. This position handled Title I services programs, EL, English language learners, personnel services, FMLA, some contract negotiations, but mainly employee issues, grievances. It is a critical position. We employ a lot of people, around 800. We are the largest employer within the town departments. So the position was very helpful, but we recognize that we need money for the classroom, and that position has been eliminated. We also were able, as I mentioned earlier, to reduce a grade 3 position. This is a position cut. It's not a person cut. And that's a result of a smaller class size coming from grade 2 to 3 next year. We made about $117,000 worth of adjustments to the level service budget. A lot of that was just cleanup. Again, that was just a straight rollover without a lot of work done on it. We have reduced SPED tuitions by $345,000. This goes back to the point I made earlier about building capacity within our own school system. So SPED tuition costs, SPED transportation are significant portions of our budget. But when we're able to bring our students back from outside placements, or when we're able to prevent them from going or be able to support them in their needs, so they don't have to be out of district place, there's obviously a direct line savings to that. So that is a very good piece of money out of that line. We also have we have a student who's also aging out, so that helps as well. We've done some reallocation of some of our expenses to some of our revolving accounts, one of which the council and you will be looking at, and that's our kindergarten revolving. As you know, we charge a tuition rate for full day kindergarten. We would love to be in a position to not have to do that. We'd love to be full day universal kindergarten. We just historically have not had the room to do it. We still will struggle. We would struggle still to have the room to do it. And I would just also state that, along with going full day kindergarten with no tuition means we have to add staff to cover that. We would also see a reduction. We would see the tuition funding go away, which is around $800,000 or $900,000 a year. So it's about a 1.5 to 1.75 delta to implement a full day kindergarten program. We were able to reduce our HVAC costs. Part of this was related to the ESCO project. We could talk a little bit about. In fact, a significant part of it is related to that. We believe that's a very conservative estimate. The ESCO project didn't complete until the end of December of 19 this past year. We are just finished up the punch list and we have not yet had our first audit done. We also, it's important to recognize the fact that we had a really incredibly mild winter. And in addition, we have been, as you might know, out of school for a while. So this year has been a kind of an anomaly in terms of what our real true energy costs are. And we believe that this number will improve and we'll continue to keep an eye on it. Obviously, the improvement of that number helps with that, with utilities, helps with our payment of the bond. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. A big piece of that savings comes from, it's not just energy savings, but it's actually maintenance savings. So, you know, we've gone from having boilers that were 40 years old to every one of our buildings has brand new boilers in it, with the exception of the high school, because they were relatively, they were in good condition and not as old as others. Not only that, but we now have a redundant boiler in all of our buildings. So if we lose one boiler, we have another one. And that was not the case before the ESCO project. I think it's just really important that that I need to do a better job making sure I remind everyone of the fact that that project, it just completely, totally accelerated work that needed to be done within our buildings, and we just could not have done it any other way. And then there's some miscellaneous other items that are part of that. I'm happy to answer if you have questions when we come back. Again, just wanted to continue to talk a little bit about the ESCO project. These are the large kind of bucket areas that the ESCO project addressed. There was also a fairly significant portion of that project that did not have energy payback. And we wanted to take advantage of being in the position of doing this work. And I'll just give you an example. When you replace all the lights in the high school and you have spaghetti ceiling tiles that are cracked and broken, which are pointed out by, you know, the NEASC and others, and it just, you don't want to put brand new LED lights and make those ceiling tiles stand out even more, right? So that was a cosmetic change, but a really important change to the overall condition and I think environment of the high school. That part alone was close to $400,000 just to replace the ceiling tiles and grids. So we did all the major core areas and we also did all the hallways, and we weren't even able to, with that money, even get into all the classrooms. But that is an example of one of the things that we did with some additional funding through the bond. We pay for those items out of our yearly $1 million capital amount that we have been fortunate enough to receive from the mayor and the council year over year. So about a couple $100,000 of that $1 million goes to a direct payment to those items that were not energy payback cost savings. We also, the redundant boilers were not an energy payback, obviously, but they were necessary. We really needed to have that in place. That was part of those additional funds. And then we also rebuilt the pneumatic header at the high school, bringing it from 5 zones in that high school of 380,000 square feet to 15 heating zones. Obviously, a little bit better controls to save money on how we distribute heat within the building. Let's go funding some of the questions that were asked, and some of these answers were provided by Mr. Spellman. The funding of $8.9 million or $10.3 million was approved by council order. You can see that in February of 18. 8.9, and I won't go into those points because I don't necessarily think they're completely important for us to talk about, but I want to provide the information because there were questions that were asked. I certainly can continue to discuss it if you'd like to. But you can see how the funding worked. The guaranteed savings in the year that they did the audit and the assessment for the beginning of the project was $464,000. I want to make sure that it's understood. The savings, the guaranteed savings is energy consumption. It's not that dollar figure. Obviously, rates change for our electric. Gas prices, all those things change year over year. So the guaranteed savings is based on the amount of energy this project will save year over year. If it doesn't save that amount of energy, then we are guaranteed the difference between what they said we'd save and what we did save. That's the guaranteed savings that goes toward repayment of the bond for energy payback items. We are, as I said earlier, we've completed the project in 2019. We've basically just finished punch list, and now we will be looking this summer at our first project audit, where they will come in and see how we're doing. Part of this is our own human cooperation with it. We can't have teachers jacking up classrooms beyond the recommended levels of heat. You know, so it's if anything's going to go wrong with it, it'll be it'll be a human error. So so that's the basic funding structure for the ESCO project. And I just have put in a few slides just so you all can see how much work was done. The days of on the top left picture, that was a hallway, and that was the lighting in a hallway before the new project. And if those of you have been able to walk up through, it's just been a tremendous difference. Water conservation was also part of the project. We put in brand new transformers, replacing 45-year-old transformers at the high school. And again, high energy efficient boilers, 11 installed across our 7 elementary schools. And a big part of this cost is also not part of the payback, is the asbestos that we encountered when that work was done. Asbestos wrapped pipes within boiler rooms, and actually in some of our boilers, asbestos containing materials within the boiler itself. So there was quite a bit of abatement that happened during the project. We also converted Flaherty to hot water heating from steam. Actually, Flaherty had 2 separate systems and was running off 2 separate systems. So a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work done, and all of it, I think, to benefit us long-term. We also have an energy management control system that we purchased as part of this package, meaning that we can literally go onto this management system. We can see the amount of energy that's being consumed. We can shut individual boilers down. We can turn up temperatures within a zone from a computer. Just give a couple screenshots. This is one screenshot of the system. So you can see this is Liberty Elementary School. If you wanted to change the temperature in a room or within a zone, you would just go, there's several different ways to do it, obviously, but from this floor plan, you just go to the zone, click on the button, set the temperature, and it will do it automatically. All of our boilers are set for certain set points. Obviously, right now, we're just keeping things from, freezing, basically. We're just minimal temperatures. So this is a tremendous benefit to us. And part of that is that every single piece of equipment that was new and installed was identified. We received essentially an as-built after the project was done, which we were then able to, this is not just another look showing that's our unit ventilators in our zones, and another way that you can access the system to see what's happening. But this is also our facilities dude. So when this project was complete, all of the new equipment, and I apologize for the small print, but I didn't want to take you through the system. All of our new equipment was identified and put into facilities dudes. So we know exactly what the serial number of those units are. We know exactly when they were installed, and not only the new equipment, but all the equipment that was identified through the audit when they first walked through. So all of our older equipment, or anything that was not part of the project, that has some kind of time life cycle and needs for both preventative maintenance and for repair, are in this system by school, with the exception of South Middle School, because we did not do this project at South, anticipating we're going to get a new school. And also East Middle School, clearly, because we were in the middle of construction. East Middle School will also, at the end of the project, all the data, all the equipment, and all the things that go along with that will be put into facilities dude. So we will have the same information. In fact, we'll have better information from that project on every piece of equipment that we have. This is just another screenshot of Facilities Dude. This is actually how we utilize our work order process. So these are work orders that are put in by either senior custodians, by principals. They may be put in by a facilities manager. They actually go to our facilities manager. He assigns to the appropriate staff member, maintenance person, and then the work order is tracked. So when it is, it's identified as being what kind of level of priority is it. You can see there are a couple of critical ones on this one, a medium and low, and is when those are complete, the person doing the repair makes the note, marks it, and we can track the work that's being done. This program, we're just scratching the surface on its capability. We can even put in here how long we think a project should take to do and start to get some efficiency studies on how our people are doing in terms of the time it takes to complete the work. So finally, here are the budget articles. As the school committee votes on these 10 budget buckets, essentially, articles. And you can see, obviously, Article 4, curriculum instruction, that's where all of our teaching staff, instructional staff, support staff are within Article 4. Total budget of $73,218,902 for a 3.6% increase. So with that, I am done. I won't leave in case you have questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hackett. I think if actually you don't, yeah, perfect. Stop sharing screen. That helps. And would it be possible for you to send the committee this revised presentation so that we have that? You're on mute, Dr. Hackett.
Because I just don't want to hear you. I don't want you to hear me drinking. So yes, I would be happy to do so.
That would be great. Thank you so much. And I know you sent over, I think it was about an 11-page document with answers to questions, thorough and rigorous. So thank you for that in advance. I do want to open it up to the committee for any additional questions. Counselor Connors?
Hi, Dr. Hackett. So I just have a couple follow-up questions. I'm wicked echoey. Why?
Their laptops on, maybe.
No. All right, we'll try again. So you had said, I don't know why that's doing it. The custodial differentials, you said you would talk a little bit more tonight about those. Could you just go through why the significant jump in numbers on that?
So part of it was some old practices that would not be considered best practices in how our custodians were being paid to do night differentials. And I say that with a lot of love in my heart and with respect. But there have been some leftover practices with a person who is going to actually do a building check. Generally, that rested with a senior. They couldn't do it for whatever reason, and then they would pay out of their own pocket the person who was going to do the building check to do the building check. So some of it was cleanup. Actually, even though that item, the overall article or line item is up, I do think that the structure we have in place moving forward is more efficient, and I would anticipate that we would likely see an actual year-over-year decline in the amount of money we're spending on building checks. We've also been we have some custodians who are doing multiple buildings. Obviously the building checks are pretty important. So, we need to make sure that nothing's leaking, that heat is on, but some of the stuff has been removed. The need has been removed by the ESCO project and the management system I just showed you. We now know when a boiler goes down, so there's less time that's going to need to be spent. The building checks also, just as a matter of course, were really underpaid. I mean, we're talking about people who are giving up their weekends. We're talking about people who are giving up Christmas Day to come in. We're talking about people who are giving up time with their family to come in and do the work. And candidly, the discussion sounded a lot like we're not sure we can continue to find people who want to do it because there's just not enough of an incentive to want to do it. So that explains the increase in that line. It was contractually negotiated.
Okay. And in the career awards, you explained it well, so thank you.
Sure.
But is that a contractual requirement, or is that just something the town does?
So the contract has always had a career award. That's not new. What we did do with some language was the language that existed around retirement and notifying us of when you were going to retire said something like you had to notify us. It was, I think, 18 months ahead of time. So what would happen, people would just, if they thought they might possibly, in any realm of possibility, retire, they would let us know 18 months ahead of time, and then we would get to that point, and it didn't mean anything because it was so far out. A big part of our ability to budget well and efficiently is to know what our staff is going to look like. So when we know we have a retirement, we are able to then take the money that we know we are likely going to save from someone going out at the top of the scale and the replacement coming in at a different lower level. If people are just telling us 18 months ahead of time and that was the only requirement, then we couldn't really count on that in any significant way. So what we've done in the contract, we've tied the career award to that retirement notification, and we have included a irrevocable letter that a teacher has to sign. It's essentially a contract within a contract. When they tell us and they sign that they're going to retire, then they need to retire. And if they don't do that, obviously we can't fire them, but they lose the opportunity to ever receive that career award moving forward. So that incentive is very helpful for us. We've also tightened the time frame as to when they need to tell us that they're going to do that.
Okay. What dictates, and this is a new question, so sorry. As I kept looking through it, I had a couple.
No worries.
What dictates facility rentals? And so there was again a jump last year in facility. So what dictates when we have to rent facilities? Is that?
So we have a facilities rental process. The school department has always been very, in my view, in my experience in other places, has been always been very generous to community groups, town groups, youth sports. When we rent facilities, we're talking about our gymnasiums because the town controls the fields. And we provide very good rates for, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, but we do cover our costs with custodial time, but that's the bulk of the facilities rental. The other piece that we had been receiving rental for is Foster, which is a school that was actually years ago no longer a school. It was turned over to the town, but the arrangement that had been made was that the school department was going to take care of the building, and the school department was collect the rental on the building. We had a tenant in there that we started working with about this time last year, actually a little earlier than that, working with them to tell them that we were not going to continue to rent because the building itself is in need of some significant work from like all the other schools, new roofs, so we didn't want to continue to make that investment. That renter, the tenant did find another location. They have since moved out, and now we will be turning Foster over in full to the town, and then the town can decide what they want to do with it. The assessed value on Foster is around $5 million. It's an asset that the town can decide what they want to do with in terms of whether they want to sell it. Obviously, it now becomes town property and under town control.
Okay. And Chapter 70 funding, do you think with the budget cuts and everything that's going to go on, I see you guys have put in for the FY21 numbers, and if that decreases, which is what it may be looking like, how do you plan on compensating for the differential?
So we feel relatively confident as anyone can be in this particular environment, that our Chapter 70 is going to be protected. And the reason why I say that is we did not benefit from the Student Opportunity Act that was passed during the year last year, like other school systems did. That act obviously was meant to change the formula for communities that were experiencing really severe changes in demographics, and also funding issues around local economies. it really tried to work on equity. And I think the formula did that, but it didn't help Braintree because the bulk of the formula is based on property tax and ability to pay or community wealth. Braintree, whether you want to hear it or not, is considered to be pretty wealthy. And I know that doesn't always feel true, but the state views us in the new formula as really not needing the level of resources that other communities need, like a Worcester or like a Springfield. So what we receive for an increase in Chapter 70 funding is what's called foundation increase. So a foundation increase really is the minimum increase that any community is going to get year over year. So I would be surprised if that increase were going to be taken away by the state. I think it is much more likely that they are either going to not fund the Student Opportunity Act or they are going to partially fund it. But I believe that we're relatively safe at that number.
Okay, good answer. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Counselor Shasha.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, Dr. Hackett. I just have
Evening.
two questions, and I know you already know what they are, but I want to go back to ESCO and
I'm going to
facilities.
pretend like I don't know what they are because I just want to be surprised.
Okay. So as far as the ESCO project, I'm trying to get this clear in my mind because I know that the guaranteed savings in usage and not dollars, but still, if you go back to 2017, $464,000 would have been just under a third of the total utility spending. So a fairly significant expected reduction. And I can see that since then, the budget has not kept up with actual utility expenditures. We're spending a couple $100,000 more now than is budgeted. And the budget has been relatively flat. But still, I'm waiting to see that budget drop down by a couple $100,000. And
Right.
it's still budgeted flat from last year. So the question is, when are we going to start seeing those savings? And are we holding that money off for, let's say, building infrastructure improvements, or is that just going right back into the general fund and we're going to be spending it on other things? So that's question one.
That's question one. That felt like all right. So the answer is a little bit more complicated and involves some history. Not unlike departments within the town that have underfunded historically lines like overtime, for example, that have been funded year over year through supplemental budgets. The school department has historically not funded at the level it should have funded its energy lines. So we started in a bit of a deficit that we've been working out of for the last 5 years at least, trying year over year to gradually increase the amount of money we put into our utilities lines. So for us, we've had to do some catch up with funding within the lines. The other thing I would just say, and I think it's a really important point, I did mention it earlier just quickly, it's not just utility savings that we're talking about. It's also the amount of money that we spend on maintenance. So just as an example, every year over year, we've been spending about $280,000 on HVAC repair. HVAC repair has included the things that we're talking about, right? New steam traps, pipes that have burst, asbestos abatement on those pipes that have burst because the water has soaked all over the asbestos wrapped pipe. And then just to make it more fun, at Ross, for example, that asbestos wrapped pipe, the asbestos material, fell onto the dirt floor within the boiler room that turned a $90,000 project into a $160,000 project because they had to dig more dirt out. So those are the expenses that we are very hopeful and confident that we're not going to continue to see. $280,000 that we spend on HVAC repair, the bulk of that has been on maintenance. In maintenance standpoint of a contractor coming in, Solar Tech specifically, and that's the company that we've used for a long time, coming in and making immediate repairs to boilers, to pipes, to whatever it is that has to do with our HVAC system. So the total savings that we're talking about isn't just in the energy usage for us. It's going to be also in the amount of money that we're going to be spending on our maintenance of the systems that we have in place. I don't, it's maybe not the answer that we would like to be giving you, but it is the reality. And we will continue to be able to save money, both I think certainly in energy usage, but also in our maintenance. The issue is just our starting point from a dollar standpoint year over year in the operating budget isn't where it should have been. And but again, we know that our job is to make sure that bond payment gets paid, and we take full responsibility for doing that, because going back to the conversation about what we were able to do with those funds, that investment will pay off year over year for the school department and for the town.
Okay, but it is your expectation that, I know we don't have 2020 actuals yet, but starting probably when we get 2020 actuals, we will start seeing those utilities numbers coming down significantly.
Well, 2020 is going to be tough, right? Because we've lived through a year that was an incredibly mild winter, and we've been out of school since mid-March. So this is not going to be a typical year in terms of our usage. What we're really need to look at is hopefully getting through a year and going through a year that's more typical. And I believe FY20 would show that, 21 will show that. Part of the ability for the town to obviously the school department to provide money back to the town in this fiscal year has been savings on the fact that we haven't been heating the buildings for a couple of months. And even though this is the time of year we generally turn stuff off, but so and that's why we were trying to be conservative with the amount of money that we are cutting within the utility and maintenance budget, because it's just not been a typical year, number one. And number two, as I stated, year over year, we've not been budgeting what we should have been budgeting, even though we have worked hard to try to build that up over time. It truly becomes a resource decision, right? I mean, it's the difference between hiring a teacher at $65,000 for a classroom or putting $65,000 into the utility line that you have to make. And coming out of that situation takes time, unless you just decide that you're going to make really difficult decisions and just fund it fully. I mean, substitute teachers is another example of a line that year over year we don't really know exactly what we're going to be faced with. Some years we have what feels like 50% of our staff out on maternity leave. In some years we have none. In some years we have sickness go through. So there are certain parts of our budget that are a little less predictable than others. But.
Okay, thank you. I think I got it. And then the other question is related. The other question is related, and it's and if this should be deferred to the capital plan discussion, I'd be happy to wait. But it's related to facilities, dude. And I just want to make sure that that we are going to be able to see at some point, especially when it comes to the new boilers and everything at East, a list or a plan for all the maintenance that needs to be done.
Yes. The answer
Okay.
is yes. Where we are right now is what I kind of just snapshot showed you tonight, which was we have all the new equipment and a lot of the existing equipment identified by brand, by serial number within the system, in the system. Now the next steps are building it out and getting to a scheduled preventative maintenance plan, which we are already working on. And that definitely will be in place, and that's the goal. The system itself is more powerful than we're able to handle right now, but we it's going to make a huge difference for us. I would say the same about Munis and the transition to Munis. I will tell you that in the 5 years I've been here, developing a budget, knowing where we are month over month, has been a very frustrating experience with SoftWrite. The reporting mechanism is garbage, to be candid. When you try to get really good data, it just doesn't exist. And then as part of our conversion over to Munis, we've also completely reorganized our chart of accounts to be more in line with the state. So then when we come here in front of you with accounts and we try to talk about a line going up or down dramatically, there are oftentimes, it's been in the last several years, it's been because it's not been put in the right line and we've moved it to a different line. So we are so much farther ahead than we were. Munis, I've worked with before. In fact, everywhere I've ever been has been on Munis. It's really truly the gold standard, and it's an investment that I'm really glad the community and the town has made. I think you will be glad because the reporting features are just so much better, and it'll definitely pay for itself.
Okay. Well, first, I can assure you that nobody will be more glad than the people on this committee to have better financial reporting. That is a serious sore point right now.
Well, I'll tell you, as a superintendent, generally superintendents don't get fired for curriculum emergencies, but they can often lose their job for fiscal and budget issues. So it's been a really, honestly, kind of a white knuckle ride using SoftWrite. It's really hard to know where you are at any given time, and that's just not the way we should be operating.
Okay. So when it comes to facilities, I guess my concern is I'm looking at I'm jumping ahead, but I'm looking at the capital plan, and I just want to make sure that there is adequate money set aside. I think there's one thing that everybody agrees on is that we're not going to let East and the new boilers and everything else let maintenance fall by the wayside.
Correct.
Right. And I want to make sure that as we look at spending going forward, that all those things are in the plan somewhere. And if we have to not buy a dump truck for some other department to make sure that we do all this new equipment right from the beginning, I really think we should do that. And I don't see I don't see the actual reporting out of facilities, dude. And I just want to make sure that what money is available is going to cover all of that.
So, we have the same goal and the same commitment. And, what we have that is old and what we have that needs repair is for us a less of a priority than making sure that everything that we put in new, we schedule it correctly. We have preventative maintenance in place, take care of those assets because, it's for the first time in probably 30 years or 20 years, the school department has new stuff in their buildings that they can now have a fresh starting point. And those investments we take very seriously. Facilities, dude, candidly, we are in the infancy of implementation, and we will continue to build it out, but we will take full advantage of it moving forward. The other capital issues, and I'll just say this, and I know that tonight's not the night for capital, and have said this quite some time. We're at a point, and I'll take the high school as an example. We're at a point where what really amounts to $600,000, $700,000 a year doesn't do what we need, right? Our high school, to the projects that we have in front of us at the high school, for example, are bigger than that. And without some kind of additional funding that is larger, we can't go in, for example, and gut the locker rooms and completely redo them because there's asbestos mastic on the tiles that are in there on the walls. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars a project, if not more than that. Everything we touch has to be up to code. So the amount of money that's needed to do the real renovations that we'd love to do aren't going to be contained within the $1 million a year in capital. It's impossible. We all know right now that we need a new roof almost on every building. We've put in for that. We know it will be on the ballot. If that funding doesn't go through, and I've had a couple of you ask me that question in other meetings, candidly, I don't have a plan. We don't have a plan. We don't have a plan for $10 million worth of roof work that is contained within our operating budget or within $1 million a year in capital. So because the projects we have in front of us and remaining are so big, our capital funding generally goes to making sure that we are keeping up with what needs to be repaired. And part of that will be the new equipment that's going into place.
Okay, so in your opinion, your budget and the capital plan is sufficient to cover, maybe not ideal, but sufficient to cover all of the new equipment and, as needed repairs on the other equipment.
But yes.
Okay.
To that question.
Okay, thank you.
Any unforeseen circumstances where we have
Sure.
an expenditure that comes up within the budget that we totally didn't expect.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Counselor Flaherty?
Hi, Dr. Hackett. Thank you so much
Hi.
for all of this detailed information. It's really very, very helpful to me, and I found that your answers to our questions was excellent. But the thing you haven't touched on today that I would like to hear about is whether, have you started to have some budgetary conversations about how you might contend with a situation in the fall where we're unable to return to the classroom model of education that this budget is based on? Like, what if we have to resume with a remote learning model or some kind of blended model where we have to modify classroom learning in a way that employs social distancing measures?
So my short answer to the question is that we are charged with working with a budget that is approved. And for us to come in and really explain to you that we need another 3%, a couple more $1 million is not really practical. And whenever we develop our budget year over year, I believe we do so and as fiscally responsibly as we can. I think that, we don't come in and with a first budget round at 10% when we go to the school committee, then we eventually go to the mayor. It's not a question of coming in with a wish list. Will we come in with, in fact, we do our budgeting over a 3-year time period. So when we not only develop the 21 budget, we are also thinking about 22 and 23 because we know there's some really predictable costs. Like we know the enrollment shifts that are going to happen. We know and will know better, to Councilor Sash's point, certain pieces of equipment that are going to need to be repaired or upgraded. So we work hard to think about our budget over a 3-year period because you can't do everything in 1 year. To answer the question specifically, we've done nothing but try to figure out this new world that we're living in. And candidly, it's been a real challenge. 5 years ago when I came, we did not have hardwired connections in all of our schools to the internet. High speed, we did not have. We had barely any Wi-Fi connection in our buildings. And it was because of a grant that was applied for and received prior to my arrival the year or two before that we were even able to make those investments. Imagine going from that point to where we are right now. We've never been one-to-one at our high school. We've never been one-to-one at our middle school. And the amount of technology we have at the elementary level are, fairly minimal. I mean, they're enough because we've got great people who do great work. We don't believe that technology is the answer in the classroom instruction environment, but guess what? Things have changed. So, some school systems, obviously, and I for the first time in my career, have been, Boston has been put out there as a school system to be envied. Although I haven't seen anybody move out of Braintree to put their kids in the Boston public schools, but just the same, there are certain school systems who have resources that are beyond ours and were able to jump out of this a lot more quickly. Not to mention the human aspect of this. When I think about doing what we're doing tonight, I would just have you think about 25 first graders, and you probably can do it better than others, Councilor Flaherty, but 25 first graders that you can't even see on the same page that you have in a classroom video conferencing meeting, 3 of whom might be naked by the time the meeting's over. You have no control over the behavior. And that is daunting for many of our teachers. And candidly, there is no replacement of having our kids in our buildings in front of our teachers. That's how we've been, and we have begun, obviously, and have learned a lot, and how we're thinking about next year is worst case scenario. What if we were out for the entire year? What does that look like? And how do we build our curriculum around that? And in the flexibility that we need to have with it is that we not only flexibility within our curriculum and our instructional delivery, but we have to have the same level of flexibility within our budget. So things that we might have done or might be doing if we were truly back to school full time. If we're not, those resources have got to get shifted quickly into a different model. Now, clearly, we will be ramping up the amount of Chromebooks and devices that we purchase going into next year. We distributed about 300 to students, all of which will come back in various conditions, I'm sure. Probably 50% will have no power cord when they come back. I mean, that's the kind of, those are the kind of issues we're going to have to be dealing with, and we're prepared to do that with that. But it's still a build process. We can't do all this in one fiscal year. What we got to make sure we do is guarantee the best level of instruction and curriculum that we can. and be ready to be flexible and fluid and really nimble with the environment. I mean, we could be in a situation where we come back and then 4 weeks into the school year, we get shut down for 6 weeks. So the challenge that we've been giving to our leadership team and our content directors and principals has been, how do we respond to that? I mean, we want to be in a place where you're in school on Friday, we shut down on Monday. It's seamless. You know, you go from the instruction that you're providing and the lessons and units that you're providing in the classroom right into the remote learning environment. Clearly, there are considerations that need to be made around the number of students in our school. We're not going to be able to put 600 high school kids in a cafeteria if we need 6-foot social distancing. We are continuing to look to the state to provide guidance on some of this stuff, but we know that there's a lot of local conditions that we have to think about and adjust for. Candidly, I do not have an answer tonight for some of these questions, particularly the question of transportation. I mean, everybody wants to talk about social distancing within buildings. We have 380,000 square feet at the high school. We'll figure it out. But how do we put children on a bus, provide 6-foot social distancing, meaning no one can sit next to them, no one can sit in front of them, and no one can sit behind them? I don't know how we pull that off. I'm sure that we'll find the answers. But we will do all of it within the budget that you approved this evening, or that that we're recommending to you, I should say.
Thank you.
Well, you certainly have your work cut out for you. I am really interested to hear, well, we're all waiting with bated breath, right? To hear whatever it is good, the data is going to show we need to do next. And, I have a lot of confidence that you're going to be able to manage whatever it is. And you will certainly have my full support for funding whatever it is you need to do. It's not easy. You're right about the first graders. There's no remote learning for them. Not really. And the high schoolers and middle schoolers are a little bit better to cope and get something out of an online curriculum, but even that it's not as good. So I think the most expensive prospect is probably some sort of blended plan where you have to get half the kids in for 1 week and the other half in another week. And I think you might even face some contractual disputes to handle that. I mean,
there's been, candidly, there's been pushback on what we're doing right now. I mean, and the pushback is understood because we have teachers who really don't use technology in their classroom. I mean, we don't want first graders in front of iPads all day long, and we don't base our curriculum on technology. Some school systems, candidly, do it to survive, and it doesn't surprise me that Boston Latin came out of the gate with a plan, or that Weston came out of the gate with a plan, because they have the resources. They've been doing it all along. We're not going to transition to a true online learning model. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us, and we got to maintain quality that we want and that our families and students have come to expect. But there are a lot of unanswered questions right now about how we do that.
Well, I'll just finish by saying that my son got a sign in our yard now for being a 2020 graduate of South Middle School, and he's so proud of it. He's just, it was a surprise to him. And also there was a sign in our yard for me in the fall and over the summer, and now he's got a sign and he loves it. He really loves it. So thank you for whatever role you played in that, because it made his day.
Good.
I want to recognize school committee member George Kokoros. And you're on mute, Mr. Kokoros.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Dr. Hackett was saying about the possibilities of, not going back or, some kind of blended situation. We also have to think about the opportunities we have with the federal government. And I know Senator Markey's been working very hard on, expanding the E-rate program and things like that. So we know that we have to stay diligent on those things as well, because, it doesn't matter how big the budget is and how we rework things. If the situation were to change, we'd have to look at, and I think, a lot of systems will have to look at what other funding and resources are available outside of what we can do as a town. So I just wanted to add that.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments from the committee members? Counselor Ryan.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Hackett.
Good evening.
Just had a question. The collective bargaining agreement that you folks signed, were they the same as the other unions in the towns? Did you get the same percentages?
Correct.
Okay. And that's all accounted for on the budget, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing we don't cover out of the contract in our budget is health insurance and benefits that the town, that's within the town's budget.
Okay. And then under technical department, the comp serve technicians going up substantially. What was that for again?
Can you tell me what the line was again? Just the title of it?
It's page 10, and it's the comp serve technicians, and it's going up 123,000.
We had added staff for our technology department last year.
How many staff was that?
Just one. That also obviously includes contractual increases for the staff within that department.
Okay. And then the custodial differentials that we talked about earlier, it's going up 29,000 up to 43,000. How I know you said that's for building checks. So is that for one person a day checking bill? How often does that happen? Once a day? Once every day in the weekend? I'm just trying to understand how that works.
Weekends, holidays, vacation time is when the building checks happen. And it's multiple people. We do have a couple people who check more than one building, but each building it's generally the senior who does the building check. But if not, then we have coverage from other custodians within the unit.
So it's weekends, holidays, and school, summer vacation?
Time. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so is it really, it's really like the person's getting overtime for that day to go check on these?
Essentially, it's that kind of compensation, although it doesn't necessarily work out dollar for dollar that way.
Okay,
We've also requiring a submittal for the building check time. So that had not been a part of the process. The way that those happened before was people were paid a stipend. They were paid the stipend over the course of the year. And that's kind of why we were getting into if people didn't do it, then they cut someone who did it or gave them the cash out of their own pocket to do it. So we've changed that process.
so that sounds like a good change. And that's, but that's one person at a time doing, or do you have multiple people? Like on a weekend, do you have more than one person doing it?
It could be, but generally it's one person. I mean, if someone got sick and they needed to call in a junior to do it, then that might be. And that's why we're requiring the timesheets, because there is a difference between the amount that a senior gets to do a billing check and the amount that a junior would get.
Thank you. And then with the ESCO program, again, I'd be very interested to see, I understand how they came up with the estimate on how much money you would save based on a set criteria, and then how that can change over time. I'd be interested to see when you come up with your first evaluation of if you're attaining those goals.
Yep.
How the decision criteria was utilized to come up with, you know, high, low amounts and where they attained or not. I guess I'm requesting that we be allowed to see that.
Absolutely. We can send you a full, and that was the intent. I know that Councilor O'Brien had asked for yearly reporting on that, and our intent would just be to send you the audit that gets done. We'll have some work to do around responding and how we're going to make changes if we're not hitting the targets.
And then when would that first audit be done?
My understanding is that the audit will be taking place this summer or into fall. Now that the punch list has been done, I think as soon as that's totally signed off on, I believe it's a 60-day wait period, and then they will do the audit.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said. It's going to be it's an abnormal year.
Right.
So I don't know how real those numbers are going to be.
Right. I think we just have to really go back and, like we do in other parts of our budget, and look at our 3-year averages and kind of take out the outliers and just try to get a best estimate as we can.
Yeah, maybe they can take the seasonality out of it, so to speak, and look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, like a degree day. Yep.
Okay. And then over to, I'm going to say this wrong, was it maintenance dude that program?
It's some dude.
Some-
Call it dude.
So my question is, and I know you explained this a little bit, when we get new equipment, like we've gotten with the ESCO program, do they submit electric, what they might call 1080s, to be automatically input into this software? Or does your staff have to get all the specs and input them all themselves?
So with the ESCO project, part of the deal was that they were going to do the input. That was part of the project. And the same is true with the East Middle School project. Though they will put those data into the system. In fact, the school dude or the facilities dude or just the dude was purchased in part with part of the East Middle School project funding. So the dollars that for the initial purchase and the setup were partially offset through the project itself. And it's the expectation of the MSBA. I mean, they want to know, like all of you and us, that we're going to maintain those assets as they, as we go over time. And what they're finding, and this was actually a study that the MSBA commissioned, is many school systems, once the building is built, they do not keep up with the preventative maintenance on the new facilities. And we just don't want to fall into that. Clearly, I mean, we're fortunate to be in the position we're in. As I've said in other places, we still, Hollis Elementary School was built in the same year that the Titanic sank. So if we think about the age of our buildings, we have really some aging buildings that we've got to really be thinking about the longer term picture, regardless of whether or not South Middle School passes. We cannot continue to think that we're going to get another 50 years out of Hollis or 50 years out of Highlands. We've got to offline some of these older assets, and because it's just costing money. That really is not an efficient way to do business.
So with facilities dude, who is the person entering a lot of the baseline information on the specifications for the equipment, the preventive maintenance, and then the actuals that the work's actually getting done? Is that the maintenance manager you just hired, or?
The initial entry of all the new equipment, the preventative maintenance schedules, all that will come from the manufacturer specs, and it will come from the Noresco was the company that did our ESCO project. They have, in fact, already put those data into the system. So that's in there now. As I said earlier, East Middle School it'll be the same thing. The contractors, the project will put all the information in initially, including.
Yeah, but you have projects. You have work being done, but then you have a bunch of other buildings that
Yes.
you have old equipment. So who's putting the specifications in for
Well,
those?
we don't have old equipment anymore, really. I mean, all of our buildings have been touched by the ESCO project, or we have East Middle School or South Middle School would be the only one that did not come under ESCO. So every one of our elementary schools now has a brand new boiler with a backup redundant boiler and all the things that go with that. So,
Great.
we really are, knock on wood, but we're in the best shape we've ever been in. And I think that obviously we could never have made these kind of upgrades so quickly, and they were necessary. Now we're just hoping we can get the roofs done, candidly.
I would recommend that you stay on top of that facilities dude from the perspective of checking on it periodically to make sure that it is where you think it is, and don't
Right.
assume it is, because you can fall behind very quickly with entering the actuals and making sure things are entered in a uniform way, that you're not getting, garbage in equals garbage out.
Right.
So, and I think what you do have going for you, besides, I think Tom Devon has a lot of experience with computer.
He does have a lot of experience. I will also just say that, part of the thinking around hiring a facilities manager is it's like everything else. I mean, you got to have one person who's in charge that can be held accountable and is responsible for running the system. And we've just never had that before. We've had kind of seniors individually working, doing a good job, but not in any kind of coordinated way or in a way that really kind of gets at the bigger picture.
That's all I had, Dr. Hackett. Thank you very much. And
Thank you,
thank you for
Councilor
the great
Ryan.
job you and all
Good to
your
see you.
staff do every day. And good luck with the challenges that you're facing in these difficult times. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Hackett.
Same to you. Thank you.
I want to recognize School Committee Chairman, Mr. Devon. And you're on mute.
I got him.
Okay,
I got him. You're
Am I on?
unmuted. Yeah, for some reason I have the power to mute people here. This is awesome.
Talk about strength.
Behave yourself or you might be muted.
Okay. More than a
We
few
can't,
questions.
we can't see you, Tom.
Yeah, my computer's telling me that I didn't upload correctly. I had my son have to get me to this point, and I'll have another expert help me go further. Quite a few questions have come up as far as where we are with our maintenance program. I think it's important that people realize up until about 4, 5, 6 years ago, our maintenance program was just that. It was in name only. With our getting the proper maintenance people on board with a maintenance manager, a central person that will be responsible, we've changed from being reactive or doing, Charlie, what we would call CMs, corrective maintenance, to looking forward to doing predictive maintenance on some of these new assets. Now let's look to where we're getting our information. We're getting our information on the East project from the contractors that installed these new assets, what their addresses are, what their predictive maintenance schedule should be based on what we've put in. Everything, from circulating pumps to, major boilers. So that's one entity that's going to be entering into our school dude. Another entity will be Noresco, who's helped us with this ESCO project. So each and every elementary school will have some parts of them that are the brand new installed on the school dude that will produce information based on, is it something that's maintained, weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, and then you can start looking into quarterly and all things that go with that. And lastly, we have our maintenance manager, who I've had conversations with Mr. Cronin as far as bringing him up to speed as to how we'll enter actuals. Yes, Charlie, you're right. If we put garbage in, we will get garbage out. And that is one of the things I'd like to think that all of us that have discussed don't want to see happen. So we're going to be looking at information that we believe is pertinent. Those things that are superfluous will be left aside. Obviously, with a thought process to, okay, and Charlie, you and I can talk about this and go into a depth that I think more than a few of the people here, we're going to make their eyes roll back in their head, and we don't want to do that. But I've had these types of conversations with Dr. Hackett and Mr. Cronin and some of the others that are going to be part of our team maintaining the new assets that we've received from and with the town. Does that help? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. Our town auditor, Sean McGoldrick. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Dr. Hackett, if you're still there, I just have 2 quick questions. Hopefully you can address for me.
Certainly.
Excellent. Circuit breaker. Obviously, like most towns, Braintree gets circuit breaker, and typically it looks like for the past few years, 3/4 of that circuit breaker money is spent annually. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what that is actually used for in terms of sped costs?
The sped cost would be for circuit breaker. The bulk of it would be for any kind of out-of-district tuition. So collaborative tuition, or in fact, that's pretty much primarily what we would use it for. Our goal, which now we're not going to be able to meet, but we were trying to get to a point where we were going to be receiving circuit breaker money and spending it in the following year, and the year it was intended for. So we are carrying a balance right now because we wanted to get to that point. As you know, that's one of the reasons why we don't have to come back to the council on it or the mayor on a supplemental, because and that item, an unexpected out of district tuition would be, anywhere from $65,000 to a couple $100,000, which was a big hit. So we use it really solely for tuition costs to offset, and we were hopeful again that we were going to be able to spend it in the following year, not in the year that we actually get it. But clearly things have changed.
Sure. Nope. Makes sense. And number 2, and this may be a combination of Mayor's office, Ed, and yourself, but I know that CARES Act money was just rolled out about a week ago. and Braintree received a good chunk of money, and a lot of that can go towards technology purchases. So I would highly recommend, I'm assuming you already have talked to Ed about this, but that might be a nice way to help supplement your technology costs.
So thank you. We're being told right now that we could expect about 80% of our Title I allocation, which is around $500,000 Title I. So, we're thinking that we'll be looking at probably around high threes, low fours. One of the things that we know about those funds is they don't have to be spent until 2022. We're going to do the best we can to keep our powder dry on some of those kinds of available funds, just to make sure that we don't want to come out of the gate and just use it. I think it's going to be important for us to pace ourselves and try to, talk about flatten the curve. Flattening the economic curve that we're going to be dealing with in the next couple of years is going to be pretty critically important. So, but those funds will help. We're hopeful that maybe there'll be another round, but it's obviously hard to tell.
Yep, great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the committee members? Okay, I do want to just let those in attendance know, I know the committee members have spoken quite a bit or referenced the list of questions that were sent over to the superintendent. We have done that with all of the department heads. The mayor's office will be putting all of our questions and their answers online ahead of the June 2nd public hearing, so that they will be open for the public to view, read for themselves ahead of time. So I wanted to make sure that folks who are listening in this evening knew that those would be forthcoming. And if that is all of our questions, I know we have to move to the revolving fund, but before we do that, I just want to echo the other counselors' sentiments. Dr. Hackett, your team, the school committee, I know as a parent and a resident, how much this town cares about education. And I think it's obvious from going through this budget in extremely difficult circumstances that you've really taken to heart and held sacred the importance of teachers in the classroom. And it's truly, I believe, a reflection of this community's values. So I want to say thank you for that. And on behalf of the residents as well, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you. And thank you for your support. And again, I do appreciate the questions ahead of time. It was very helpful.
Good. All right. We should now be moving to the motion for the revolving funds.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to
Yes.
make a motion for favorable recommendation to the full council on 20040R7 education, that the school committee be authorized. to
Counselor
use
Ryan,
revolving-
excuse me, sorry.
Yep.
Madam Chair, through the chair, we need to take it
Off
off
the
the
table.
table.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
mo-
Yep. Is there a motion to take off the table order 20040?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Roll call vote, please. Clerk Semino?
Counselor Baraka,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Yes.
Counselor Sasha,
Yes.
5 in favor. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I'm surprised you got me to stop once I get rolling reading that motion. So the motion is for favorable recommendation to the full council, order 20040R7 education, that the school committee be authorized to use a revolving fund in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half, that may be spent by the school committee without further appropriation during the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2020, to pay for salaries, expenses, and contractual services associated with the operation of full-day kindergarten. Revolving fund is to be credited with all full-day kindergarten fees and charges collected during fiscal year 2021. The school committee may expend up to $910,000 in revolving funds money in fiscal year 2021. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Clerk Semino?
Counselor Baraka,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
Aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Aye.
Counselor Sasha,
Yes.
all in favor.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Hackett, for your time this evening. I want to move on now. We did have some
Thank you.
follow-ups for the mayor's office, including questions on revenue and finance, the DPW, and golf. Counselor Ryan.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Tom Devon and George Kokoris for being here tonight with us as well. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you, Counselor Ryan, for that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, so I know that we had some follow-up questions for the mayor's office, and I wanted to open it up to the council now. We also received significant number of responses back from the mayor's office and over the course, I would say, of the last 5 to 7 days on these follow-ups. So I want to just open it up to the committee members to see if their questions have been satisfied or if they have if they need additional information. Councillor Connors.
Oh, I'm already not muted. Okay. So I had a couple of questions. I actually did not get them in. Sorry, Nicole. I know you love when I do this. Can you guys provide a breakdown of the building rental costs from what the billboard is versus the other revenues coming in? I know we talked about it in general, but I don't think I have the clear definition of the breakdown.
So are you looking for what the payment schedule would be on the billboard?
Just annual. I wouldn't
Sure.
even say
So that we did share that earlier this week, or last week, I think.
Okay.
Basically, the billboard, sorry, I'm just looking at myself at a weird angle here. So the billboard revenue is part of a host agreement that is required for any billboard that is going to be constructed in the town. The agreement in principle that we have with the developer for the 290 Wood Road billboard is a total of $2.5 million over a 20-year span. It is $1 million upfront, payable when the billboard is constructed and in operation, $100,000 per year for years 2 through 10, and then $60,000 per year for years 11 through 20. As I understand it, it doesn't take a lot of time to construct and begin operation for a billboard. So as soon as we get word from the court, we would expect that money to become payable. If for some reason the appeal on 290 is successful and we are back to looking at potential for the other, what I'll call competing billboard, which is 236, 240, we had indicated to them and would maintain that any agreement for funding has to at least be as lucrative as the agreement we had for 290.
Okay, so for this year, it would be $1 million. If it goes through the court, it would be $1 million up front, and that's it. So it would be
$1 million up front, an even million
then,
up front, and then $100,000 a year, years 2 through 10, and $60,000 a year, years 11 through 20.
Okay, so the rest, the $134,000, that's just for building rentals and other stuff throughout the town in the budget that you have.
I believe that that's correct. I would ask Ed just to confirm.
That's the number you have in the budget. Okay. Will we be getting an updated, I guess, budget plan with the updated information as far as like the changes to the golf and the other changes made to like the MWRA and all that? Will that be coming?
That was provided to Clerk Semino earlier this evening. I expect that she will be distributing it shortly. It includes the reductions made by the council, by the clerk's office, resulting from the MWRA reduced assessment, as well as the changes made by golf.
Okay. And OPED, just want to go back to OPED for a minute. So if we do not make the payment this year, what's the, I guess, some financial impact? Is there interest rates? What is the cost to us for not making the payment this year?
So I do want to clarify one thing that I actually realized earlier today. So while we're not going to be making contributions to OPEB out of the general fund, we are still maintaining OPEB contributions out of our 3 big enterprise accounts. So there will be OPEB contributions made by golf in, I think it's about $23,100. Contributions made through water and sewer in about, I think it's $334,000. And then BELD actually also makes OPEB contributions in the amount of $10,000 a week. So OPEB will in fact continue to receive funding, albeit reduced in fiscal 21, but it will not receive funding out of the operating budget. We started funding OPEB in 2010. We currently have over $9 million in the account, and it's funded at about 8.2%. As for kind of any impacts of not funding it to the full value, I would defer to Ed, but I don't believe that there would be any negative impact other than the balance won't increase as significantly as if we were providing funding out of the general account.
And there wouldn't be any interest charged or anything additional long-term that we're going to end up paying?
Ed,
No,
can you,
not you.
I think the answer is no.
Sean?
I see Sean is shaking his head no also, which is also good for me. So no.
So the OPED, sorry, Charlie, hold on 1 sec, I promise. So the OPED cost that we had listed in whatever it was, the 734,000, is that what it was? So part of that, so out of the 734, that's what we're not paying, correct? But we are making these other payments in addition to that?
Correct.
Okay, so we're not paying the 734K out of the general.
Correct.
Counselor Ryan?
So compared to other cities and towns, and Sean can chime in or Ed can chime in on this, we're ahead of the game with OPED. We have been. So we're in pretty good shape. And I think that needs to be taken into perspective here as well. That's it.
Thank you. Counselor Flaherty?
I just wanted to contribute to say on the record that I was responsible for the questions concerning golf. And I'd like to say how much I appreciate the information and explanation that was provided. Even though the revenue from the last 10 years isn't awesome, I am satisfied that at least for this year, they're looking okay. I'm glad to see that the food and beverage component is, or at least seems to be paying off. Also, I'm happy to see that golf has made some cuts to the budget. I know that's not easy to do. But in this case, I really think it's the right thing to do. And because those cuts resulted in a budget savings of roughly $20,000, I'd just like to say that I think it would be a really great idea to use at least some of that money to fund the cuts made to the Braintree Historical Society.
Okay. Counselor Shasha?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First, let me just say I would like to echo Councillor Flaherty's sentiment that the Braintree Historical Society is still a concern for me. I do know that a lot of their budget goes to loan payments, insurance, accounting. Their total budget is their total expenditure is $94,000, and it looks to me like little, if any, of that is for projects that CPA funding would work for. So I think I really would like to ask the mayor's office again to see if that funding can be found somewhere. As far as questions, I'm going to skip capital plan questions, right? Because I have a couple outstanding, but I'm sure you'll get to them. Only two then. First is when it comes to the water plant, I was wondering if we could get a similar kind of analysis as we got for ESCO, which is, I know it's about 4 years out. What are the financial implications now? We're raising rates to kind of increase the payments now so that there's not a huge spike later. When do those payments start coming down? Once it's online, what happens with rates and maintenance expense and all that? Is there kind of a general assessment that we could see on that?
Certainly, what I can tell you generally is how the plant will be paid for, right? Because there will be costs splitting between the three communities, Braintree, Randolph, and Holbrook, the split which is set out in the legislation. For capital costs, Braintree will cover 50% of the costs, and Randolph and Holbrook will split, and I apologize, I don't have the percentage handy. I want to say it's something like 16 and 24. No, that's not right. 16 and 34%, or however Randolph and Holbrook have decided decided to split the capital costs. And so you will be receiving this evening answers to all of the capital questions received to date. There were some questions about the water treatment plant, which we'll talk a little bit about the additional funding required for the upfront cost, which is the town share at 50%. Once the plant is in operation, operating costs will be split between the three communities based on usage that will be determined on an annual basis and adjusted accordingly. And so just generally, I can tell you now that's how the cost will be borne by the town once the treatment plant is up and running. I also, as I understand it, will be a state-of-the-art facility. So certainly there will be savings as a result of that. And so, you know, I won't speak too much. I know that Lou Dutton will be here. I think it's Thursday night is capital for DPW, including water. So he certainly is probably better suited to speak to the specifics of that. But I'll note the question about just the financial implications of the plant and try to have those questions prepared to be answered for you that evening.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the last one, I raised this a little while ago and it just kind of hung out there as a question. So I'm just gonna throw it out there again. Is it possible for the town council to reduce their salaries?
So I believe that any vote to reduce salaries has to be taken within a certain number of days. I think from taking office, I'll be honest with you, I didn't conduct a full legal analysis as to whether or not you'd be able to do that, but I am happy to get a more formal opinion from my office for you on that question. It's just a matter of timing as to when you can make salary adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, any other committee members have follow-up questions or require callbacks? I'm sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, that's okay. I was gonna just say, Jim Arsenault is here. Councilor Connors, he did work on those follow-up questions that you had. And so if it makes sense, well, we have two options, I suppose, and I leave it to you since we will all see each other again tomorrow evening and Thursday evening. I can send you the written responses to the 3 or 4 outstanding questions, and then you can let me know if you would like Jim to speak further on it. What I can say generally is I know the questions were a lot about where we see the savings from the addition of the in-house electrician. And so I'd like to speak generally to it, but I also would like to have Jim in the room so that he can jump in. If you would afford me an opportunity just to grab him, Madam Chairwoman, I can do that.
Yes, please.
So Jim has joined us. So I'll just talk generally about the questions in the event that everybody didn't have them. It was, we had a lot of conversation the last time DPW was here about the value in bringing certain positions in-house to avoid having to use a third-party contractor to perform the work. DPW's budget seeks to add, most notably, a in-house full-time electrician, and that's based on money spent from a third party having to perform services town-wide. When we bring in a third party, we pay about $75 an hour for the work. By bringing the position in-house, there would be a significant reduction in the hourly cost. And I apologize, I'm just going to look at my screen here so I can tell you specifically what it is that we're talking about. Oh, thank you, Jim. Perfect, a hard copy. So the position that's funded in the budget for the full-time electrician is funded to cover both the starting salary, which would be at the A step, and the step increase that would take effect 6 months into the position. And so the budgeted total for the year for just salary is $58,135. In addition to the salary costs, the town also covers pension costs and health insurance costs. Those are funded out of the human resources budget, which we heard about what feels like ages ago at this point, and was incorporated in the numbers that Director Shanley presented. To give you an idea, as I'm sure we all know, health benefit costs vary depending on the plan that is elected by the employee. Most cost effective for the town, employee gets their benefits elsewhere, and we don't incur cost. If they choose to elect, they can, the low end of the cost is about $7,300, which is a Harvard Pilgrim individual plan. High end of the cost is about $21,000 or just under, which is the Blue Care Elect family plan. So it's hard to say, what the total with health insurance cost is going to be for the position, because it's really dependent on the plan that the individual elects. In addition, there's the pension cost, which is about 8.2% of the cost that's added on. Even when you add all of those costs, we are still staying well below that $75 an hour. And we're able to take advantage of a full-time 40-hour-a-week electrician to perform services. It's important to remember that these costs are incurred not just by DPW, but they're also borne by other departments who need to have work done within their respective facilities. The police department, if they need work done at the police station, we go to DPW. DPW performs those services. If we don't have somebody on staff that's capable or qualified to do that work requested, we have to farm it out, which is always going to cost more money. And so one of the questions and observations Councillor Connors made was, why aren't we seeing the equipment reduction in repairs lines to show the savings by bringing the person in-house? I think we talked about this a little bit the other night. If you look at there are a couple of building repairs lines in the DPW program overall. And if you look at those, they are all consistently overspent year after year. And so I would suggest that you're not necessarily going to see a $60,000 or $30,000 reduction in a line somewhere else, but what you are going to see looking forward into fiscal 21 is that the spending on these items that would have historically increased because of the additional third-party vendor costs are going to come down, allowing for the expenditures to occur within the allotted amounts in the operating budget. And so that's where you're going to see savings. In addition, DPW has eliminated a position that was valued all in at about $130,000. And so the elimination of that position funds with excess the addition of the positions proposed in the program presented by Director Arsenault and his staff. Let's see. I think that's, Councillor Connors, tell me if there's something else we can share with you about kind of the staffing related items.
So I think my same question was about the 4 additional people we were bringing in on the water side and where the cost savings shows, because just for the record, I absolutely 100% agree that it is a huge cost savings to hire somebody full-time versus a sub. I'm all for it, but what I'm trying to show, so when people ask or, so we've got this increased cost here, but there's no reductions on the other side that anybody can see. So there's, so what it shows is, or what people perceive and what people see is there's an increase, the building repairs and the consultant fees haven't decreased. We're bringing in an additional person. So basically we just increased the budget by his salary. It is what it looks like. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think that, this is one of those items that you have to look a little bit deeper than just what the line items are in their face to see, where you're going to realize the value. I also think that this is an opportunity to point out that DPW on the overall did make significant reductions in their programs, even with the addition of the 5 positions that we're talking about. And so as for the 4 water positions, I think it's a working foreman and 3 HMEOs, which are, you can see them in the salary detail as 0 for 20 with salary for 21, so that those are the new positions. And I think that, are those stormwater positions also?
There's 3 stormwater, but those were per regulatory, and those are, in my eyes, the only issue I had really was that there were 3 working foremen and 1 laborer versus the ratio is usually opposite of that, but as explained, they can't operate certain equipment, so you need the levels.
So
So
Jim,
I don't have an issue with that one.
okay. So so what else can we provide? I mean, I guess, again, if you look at the building repair lines where a lot of these expenditures come from, they are overspent consistently. And so it doesn't, to be frank, it doesn't make sense to reduce them when, if you look at prior use, they're being overspent. So what we would anticipate is that the expenditures would stay within the budgeted amount, savings realized from the in-house full-time position.
So I'll go back and look at the building repairs line items to look at the budgeting. The water guys, I think you guys had said in your initial response that it's estimated that we do the $3 million worth of repairs, but that's the capital. Is that the capital $3 million that we do for the paved roads for the, we do them the year before we pave?
I'm going to
So we
grab
don't have
Jim.
to
He
go back
can
in?
explain that probably more
Yeah.
eloquently than I can. Watch the cord there, Jim.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So, to you, Madam Chairperson. So, so what happens is there's actually two pockets of money that are relative to construction every year. So one, it has to do with the roads construction, which is about, I think it's about 2.5 million or so for road construction.
That's the paving.
Surfacing and renovation of the roadways. But the water projects are $3 million, and that's for the putting in the drainage pipes in and all the connections and all that, and also putting basically a patch, a base course of material over the roadways as well. And so that's kind of how that works. So those are there's two different numbers. So what we're talking about is in the water and sewer budget, there's $3 million a year that we spend on placing pipe in the ground, replacing existing pipe it's either failing or is substantially old and could fail relatively, or has failed in a number of years prior to that. And replacing that pipe with new piping so that, we can make sure that we have water to our homes and all that stuff. So that's really what that's about. And we spend $3 million a year, every year, doing this. So whenever you have consistent spending of that kind of large amount every year, having a dedicated crew to assist in some of that and bring in some of that into the town to be able to have our own guys do that it would be a great, it would be a savings to the community because as you know, businesses are out to take money. So they get profit, overhead, they get all kinds of change orders that may come about. There may be the low bidder, may be high. I mean, there's all kinds of potential costs to that. And if you have something consistently over a long period of time being spent that way, drawing down some of that cost, I feel is a very prudent way of trying to use the town's money. And it would also give us dedicated crews in addition to them replacing the pipe and just lowering down, like I said, for the first year, I said it would be about 250,000 of capital we reduced from our existing yearly capital, not the long range capital. For this year, for trucks and equipment, we reduced. But in the future, we'll be reducing that 3 million down to compensate for that cost. So that will be wrapped into it. So that will be paid for through that over the long run. That will pay for those costs. And it will have in-house staff, not only that can do it, that have a vested interest because they work in the town of Braintree, that care about the community, that can work on snow removal in the wintertime, that when the water mains break, they're there and available to help and assist the community out, and do any number of other things that we could utilize them for. So I feel it's a really good and prudent way to use the funds for the town of Braintree. And that's why I sponsored it. And I have been, looking at this and trying to make sure it isn't something I just came up with last minute. I've been really thinking about it for a long time. So
I absolutely, I'll say it again. I absolutely agree with you guys. In-house versus subcontracting is always a cost savings to everybody. I completely agree. But what I didn't see is the reduction on the other side on the $3 million. So you're saying we won't save that? It's probably more than, by the time you put benefits and everything, it's more like 350,000 or whatever when you put their whole packages together. So you're saying we won't see that $350,000 reduction off the 3 million this year?
No,
Right.
for this year, we reduced our capital outlay for our equipment. We said, because what it is that capital outlay is actually money this year that we were expending. So we reduced it by $250,000 from our capital outlay for our equipment, for our trucks and all that, in order to make sure that's funded. This coming, once we get through this year, so it's not that far away, because typically in October and November is when you're doing the capital budget. That new budget, that new capital outlay, you'll see the reduction. So we are reducing. We're going from 500 to 250. And that's already within the program for water and sewer. And that we reduce that amount in order to compensate for these positions. And like I said, in the fall, then we'll also be reducing it on the next capital outlay.
On the water projects one,
Yes. Yep.
on the 3 million.
Yep.
Okay. Again, just trying to, credits and debits, right? It's all about numbers. Like I see all these credits go, or, all these debits going in the system. And I see no credits coming out, and we know it's a cost savings in the end, but it's where people don't see it.
I understand. Yep. Okay. And back to.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for that. Any other questions, concerns for the committee? Are people still feeling like they need additional callbacks? We do have this, Sue, you can just nod, on the agenda for the next 2 nights if we need to. Is that correct?
We do if we need it. We'd like to know what we need for additional information for the mayor's office if we are tabling this and doing any further callbacks. Please.
Okay, seeing none, I think we can move to a motion. Councilor Ryan?
Madam Chairman, motion is for favorable recommendation to the full council for the fiscal year 2021 operating budget. Order 20038, number 1, that the town of Braintree raise and appropriate the sum of $143,370,197.
Hold on, Councilor Ryan, please. There's revisions to these numbers with the adjustments.
Okay, do I have those?
Can I ask a
I did
question?
send you the email.
It's an email. Is Donna asking a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Madam Chair?
Hold on one second. Sue, do we need to undo anything for the questions?
No, we need to clarify, so it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Donna.
No,
Go ahead.
That's okay. I'm still learning the process as well. So we actually voting on the budget right now? Is that what we're doing?
So that was, so tonight was, if there's no need for other callbacks, then we would be making a motion, and that's what Charlie was doing.
Okay, so I thought we were going to have, once everything was in, further discussions. And so I guess you threw me for a loop there that we were voting tonight for a approval on a budget. I thought there was going to be further discussions once everything was done amongst the Ways and Means Committee, as we discussed a couple of days ago. Or did I miss something?
Well, there's separate, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong. There's the general fund budget, the operating budget, which is this. The separate is the capital budget. Correct, Sue?
So this is the operating budget. The capital budget will be presenting tomorrow night from the mayor's office and departments, along with Thursday night. The operating budget, we have had all the callbacks. You've had all your questions answered. So that's what Chairwoman Barrick was asking, if you wanted any more additional information or callbacks. And hearing none, there was a motion to move forward with these for recommendation to the full council.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was totally confused on that. I thought that there was going to be further discussions as we discussed the other night, once all the information was in, and just have a round robin, I guess you would say. So yeah, I guess then can I change at this point with my, I do want to call back? So I guess it's a procedural question, which I'll have to ask. It's Nicole at some point. With either recommendations that I wanted to make going forward or for the budgets. I don't know how to do that, I guess. I'm sorry. Newbie, learning. So I guess I do want to call back then for the mayor's office tomorrow.
Okay.
I guess that's my point.
And the question, I think what Sue is intimating and what we were hoping is that there would be a series of questions that they could prepare ahead of time.
Definitely. Definitely. I have a summary that I thought we were going to start talking about. So I can definitely send those to you, Nicole.
Councilor Ryan?
Can we go through any of this right now with Nicole right here? Would that be appropriate?
Certainly.
Yeah, and I think that was the intention for this evening, was after the school committee budget, or the school budget, have the callbacks, have Nicole, the DPW director, and anybody else we needed to discuss. So if we have further questions, now's the time. And I know Councilor Sasha's hand is raised as well.
Do you want to chime in for a minute? Maybe Councilor Sasha?
Councilor
I agree with Councilor Combs. I don't have any additional questions or callbacks, but I'm still waiting for a couple of answers as far as what our bond payments are going to be. And so, you know, making a recommendation on this without having answers to those questions would make me uncomfortable. And
So I think,
to be honest with you, that you know, if we make a recommendation on this tonight, then I think that we're saying that we are not changing anything when it comes to the Historical Society, and I would prefer to get a definite answer. If we are adamantly saying that that is not in the offing to increase that budget, then I have issues. But we left it as, you know, we would look into it. So
and I just want to sorry if this was unclear to folks. I think this is, you know, why we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to get their questions asked and answered. So if we have additional questions tonight, whether it's around bonding or Donna, whatever you have, I'd like to use some of the time this evening, because we have Nicole and we have Ed and we have Sean, and this was the intention of tonight's agenda, which is also important for the members of the public who are in attendance, that this is part of the callback time.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may, to the question on bonding, Councilor Sasha, those questions were submitted as part of your inquiries regarding the capital plan. And as soon as we finish this evening, you will receive, as will the committee, answers to all of the capital plan questions received to date, which will include a schedule for bond payments associated with the projects in the plan. And I also have, I think I already sent it, Superintendent Hackett answered the majority of the ESCO related questions you had submitted in his documents. There were some additional items to be addressed by Ed Spellman. Those were also shared with Clerk Semino earlier this evening for distribution. So as I sit here, all questions received regarding the operating budget have been answered in writing.
Councilor Flaherty?
I have to say that I'm grateful that Councilor Connors spoke up about this, because I was not prepared precisely to vote on it at this point, not because I don't have my questions answered. I feel like all the departments, the mayor's office, they have all answered all the questions that I have. What I'm interested in at this point is discussion among the counselors about the appropriateness that or debate or discussion on the appropriateness that we see in the sources of revenue that have been identified, the strategies that have been used to manage this budget. I'm interested in your thoughts on it. It may inform, how I ultimately vote. And I do wish that the mayor's office would give us an answer about whether or not the mayor's office is going to move money into the Braintree Historical Society account.
So at this time, based on the discussions I had with the mayor prior to this evening, there was no plan to add money back into the budget. I would suggest that amendment can change. That amendment can be made at any point before the budget is voted on June 2nd. And if the council is interested in increasing the funding, we are happy to engage in communication with President Hume through Clerk Semino to see if there is any additional funding that could perhaps be relocated from various sources to help support the Historical Society. I, however, would also note that within the committee and the full council's purview as it relates to the budget, it does not include increasing the funding. And so while we appreciate the concerns raised regarding the funding for the Historical Society, the town and the mayor's office is committed to continuing to provide support. But in this climate where we are pinching pennies everywhere we can, unfortunately, difficult decisions had to be made. And those were made with a priority of continuing to provide services without finding ourselves in a situation where we're having to make reductions in staff. That is not something we want to do. That is not something we're interested in doing. And the reality is, this is the leanest budget that you're going to see that allows us to maintain our current staffing levels across all departments, including schools, police, and fire, while still continuing to provide services. I started these proceedings with a general summary of this is a year of needs and not a year of wants. And that is a theme that I believe has been portrayed consistently by all of the department heads who have come before you. I certainly will continue to have the conversations with the mayor about the Historical Society. But at this point, with the reductions that we've made, we feel it's important to continue to reduce what we have to draw from free cash as we enter fiscal 21.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for the opportunity.
Councillor Connors?
So I guess at this point I would, and I'm sorry for not understanding the process that we were going through tonight. I was just, that kind of blindsided me. So I guess I will bring it up then. So I have some serious concerns with the revenues that we have put in for this year, including the town-owned land of $1.3 million, the rental buildings at 1.3. The new hires with the DBW, I can almost live with, knowing there's a $250K decrease and a next year going to be a decrease in the $3 million. I'll address my capital issues when we get to capital. But so I guess my question would be then, with the town-owned land, what would be the consequences of removing that from the budget as a revenue?
It would have to come from free cash.
So if we did a worst case scenario of free cash, today we have $9.2 million, less CIP, less support, brings us to $7.4 million. I'm just going to do round numbers. Is that okay?
Sure.
We're already using $2.4 million of the free cash. So remaining beginning of this year is about $5 million. If we don't sell Allen Street, that's another $1.3 million use of free cash or other funding, wherever it's coming from, but it still affects free cash in the end. If we only, let's say, if we don't get the $1 million up front for the billboard, that's $1 million loss. I also put in there reduced excise tax on vehicles, only because the state and other towns are doing a reduced and we didn't do that. So I did a 4% reduction. That leaves us, worst case scenario, with $2.8 million in free cash by the end of the year. Go ahead, Councilor Shasha. Sorry.
Thank you, temporary Madam Chair.
Sorry, I overrode my thing. Sorry,
Um,
Madam Chair is supposed to recognize you.
Counselor Connors, are you done?
Well, I was, but then I thought Councilor Sasha was jumping in there. So I have a serious concern with $2.8 million worst case scenario being left in the budget at the end of this year, which is below the recommended amount of 3 to 5%. So those are my concerns. Those are my issues with the budgets at this point. And I think at some point we should go back and look at the Allen Street. I know we keep saying it's going to be sold, but I don't understand why we're not putting it in when we actually sell it.
So I will just note a couple of things. I appreciate the concern. So some things I want to talk a little bit about that are not reflected. We talked a little bit earlier about CARES Act funding. What we have been told is that Braintree's allotment for reimbursement under the CARES Act, which is separate from FEMA and MEMA eligibility for reimbursement, is a total of $3.2 million. So that is currently set up in a reimbursement format, meaning we would provide documentation of our COVID-19 related costs, which is anything from PPEs, nurses, technology, etc., that would be eligible for reimbursement. So we would be able to recoup some of the funds spent, which would serve to increase our free cash balance. The other item that we keep hearing talk about, and I believe is currently in discussion on the federal level, is converting that money, that 3.2 million, from a reimbursement to simply payment, so that the town could utilize those funds as it deemed appropriate for COVID-19 related costs. So while we are currently spending on items that were unanticipated, we are expecting significant stimulus and or reimbursement on those costs. The other savings that you don't see that will turn back over to the town are the salary related savings that we have incurred through the reduction in hours. So here on the town side, effective May 4th, we reduced about 60 of our staff members' hours to 20 hours a week. Well, by doing that, the town has in its first 2 weeks saved approximately $25,000 a week in salary costs that are currently reflected in the FY20 budget that will go unspent and will get turned back over into, that will be reflected in the free cash balance at the end of the fiscal year. So roughly 50,000 in the first 2 weeks. Our staff, the majority of whom remain on a reduced schedule, will continue to receive their wages for 20 hours. They are collecting unemployment where eligible, and we will continue to realize those savings. So while considerations are being given on a bi-weekly basis to determine who needs to come back in order to make sure all services are being provided, as of now, for the next pay period, staff will remain at the reduced schedule, which means for the next 2 weeks, we will incur another savings of $50,000. So, while in addition to on the town side, the school department has also made similar reductions through voluntary furloughs and negotiations with their unions that are also going to yield a significant savings on the FY20 side that will serve to increase the free cash balance based on the money that gets turned back over at the end of this fiscal year. So while I appreciate the numbers that you ran through and the concern about the free cash balance, there are going to be significant savings that we're going to find ourselves with at the end of this fiscal year to help boost some of those numbers and hopefully alleviate some of those concerns. So as for Allen Street, I know the information was provided, but I will share it so that everybody can kind of hear it directly from me. The reason that we feel differently about Allen Street this year than we have in years past is that it is going on the market. It will go on the market before the end of this fiscal year. It will include, in addition to the requirements for the development of the property, which does have a residential component, all in line with the zoning district where the property falls, which is fairly liberal and does provide a significant amount of options for a potential bidder for use of the property, which we think will be reflected in the offers that we receive. It will include the requisite purchase and sale associated with the property, and it will include fairly tight timelines that the buyer will have to meet in order to remain eligible to purchase the property. If the selected buyer does not meet the timeline, the town will go to the next eligible buyer. And so we believe that creating these strict timetables and drafting all of the requisite sale documents up front, putting everybody on notice so that there is no confusion about the terms the town will be looking for as far as the development of this property, will expedite the sale and the ability for the town to realize the profits from the sale of the property. That did not happen this year. The property is not on the market. And so I can speak confidently about its sale and the revenue for next year because my office has drafted the documents that are required to even start the consideration of the sale of the property, and is including all of those timetables and requirements for any interested buyers so that there's no surprise when we engage in the negotiations. I can also tell you that we have received several inquiries about the property, and so I expect there's going to be significant interest in that property.
Counselor Flaherty?
Is the price on this, has that been explained as being firm? Or is there a situation where the office would consider a lower price if it didn't sell at the price that you're asking initially? If the economy can support that?
So it doesn't actually, it won't get listed with a price. It will get listed with the appraisal value. And then bidders have the opportunity to increase the appealability, that's not the right word, but I think you know what I'm saying, the attractiveness of their proposal, either through intended uses or increase financial value to the town. So the price is not set, but the appraisal, which is reflected in the budget, will be included for consideration by any interested buyers.
So you would, I don't think I totally understand what you're saying. Would they consider a lower price? Not that you're naming a price, but anybody's going to have access to what you're counting on for revenue for this item. So would you consider taking less than that if you didn't think you were going to be able to get 1.3 million?
So the proposals would be evaluated on a variety of factors. Price obviously is one of them. And so if a whole proposal was more attractive because of non-monetary related items, then the town would go with that proposal. If the most attractive overall proposal also happened to be the highest purchase price among the factors, then the town would go with that. We're not tied to just financial benefit when selecting the most responsive and the best bidder as far as purchasing the property.
What are the non-monetary factors that you're describing?
For example, it would be proposed uses for the property.
Counselor
Which proposed use are you hoping for? Sorry.
That's sorry.
I don't have the draft in front of me. I also am somewhat hesitant to get into too great a detail where it hasn't been made available to the public yet.
Okay, that's understandable.
Okay, I want to recognize Counselor Shasha and also note that Sue has emailed us the revised budget as well. So we do have that to go back to review. So just wanted to throw that out there for folks. If we want to take another evening to look back over at the revised numbers, we can certainly do that as well. Counselor Shasha?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think that would be better for me. If we're just getting a revised budget, I certainly wouldn't want to vote on what we have in front of us. I also I would prefer to wait until after we go through the capital plan, because I do think interest payments play into not necessarily what is in this year's budget, but as we think about the future. And I pointed out a couple of lines in the capital plan that seem to be errors when it comes to the interest payments, and I would just at least like some clarification on that. And I don't need it tonight if we're not going to vote on this tonight. I did also want to follow up on Councilor Connor's point about the free cash and just raise another issue, which is that we just got a request for a supplemental appropriation that includes a lot of items that seem like we are going to be seeing them again next year. So we talked about police and fire overtime, and I understand that police overtime might be somewhat reduced because we're hiring some new officers that will reduce overtime. But I mean, this year's supplemental is over $1 million. Even if you take out the extra 117,000 that's in the budget and take out an extra 20% for the people we're hiring, it's still significant. And fire is another significant factor. There were 4 other items for fire pilot programs, and I think we need a better understanding of whether they seem to be ongoing programs that are continuously underfunded, in which case we're likely to see an impact to free cash at the end of this year. And getting to where we are with free cash by the end of this year, knowing that these ongoing programs are there and are going to be hitting us in 22, which from everything I hear could be worse than 21. I just think we need to understand all of that, including the supplemental, before we vote on this budget.
Can I just ask for clarification, Councilor Sasha? You mentioned some concerns you had about the capital program. I'm just going to ask if you could follow up with Clerk Semino, because I don't recall seeing those come through. So I want to make sure that you get the answers to them before we start meeting tomorrow evening. And then for the supplemental, I would ask, I would note a couple of things. Well, let me ask first, just for clarification. Clerk Semino, is the supplemental on this evening's agenda?
No, the supplemental is not on tonight's agenda.
Then I will reserve and respond to those inquiries on the evening where it is reflected, just so that there's no confusion.
Thank you.
Counselor Connors?
So Nicole, you said fiscal year 20, we're going to have some significant savings, and I agree with you. There will be some savings there. Do we have any realm of idea of what, is there any way to get a realm? I know you probably can't answer this. Is it like 10,000, 100,000, $1 million, $10 million?
I can tell you that we have already identified about $770,000 from the fiscal 20 budget, including schools, that will go unspent. Those funds have been designated to support the supplemental request. In addition to the 770,000, I would anticipate, I can't speak for the schools, but I would anticipate that they are going to realize a significant savings once we get to the end of the year in those same salary-based costs. And for the town, if we're averaging about 25,000 a week, that potentially, depending on how long the reduction continues and the restrictions stay in place, could be another couple 100,000 just in that. And then I think what you'll see is at the end of every year, departments turn back money. A few of them, budget to the penny and spend to the penny. But I do think that in addition to the salary costs, we're going to see some of those utility savings, and then savings in other programs, for example, travel or training, things that were canceled as a result of the COVID restrictions, also all of which will turn back over.
Right, the firework, the 4th of July. Thank you for answering that. I didn't realize we funded for the next year.
So 4th of July, there are 2 lines in DPW's budget for 4th of July. Those have been designated to support the sub, and they're included in that 770,000. What is not in the 770 are the majority of the salary savings from the reduction in hours.
Okay. It's the only question I had.
Okay. I just want to add one thing, or maybe it's more than one thing, but in response to Counselor Shasha, your question, I had, and to Counselor Connors, some of the exact same concerns that you're both espousing this evening. I sent, and you may not have had a chance to read the follow-ups that came through from yesterday afternoon from the mayor's office regarding what our plan is for generating new revenue in the out years, how we plan to stay at or around about a 3% appropriation increase, you know, what the impact is going to be for Allen Street and the billboard. So I think what I want to say is I'm very sympathetic, and I think we're doing the right thing. We are holding the mayor's office feet to the fire, so to speak, right? When I got the answers to those questions back, I felt satisfied that we're doing, in my opinion, what the role is, right? We are in the business of providing services to take good care of our residents. And in an exceptional year, I feel like we have to make exceptions. And I guess I just wanted to relay that the answers that the mayor's office provided me with, you know, what the plan is in the go forward, I've took a lot of heart and comfort in. I think we're being prudent while we are doing right by the residents short term, making sure they're receiving what they deserve, and long term protecting the overall financial health of the town. So I just wanted to offer up. I know part of this evening is for discussion, and I wanted to offer that up. Councillor Flaherty.
I think that fundamentally what this committee has to weigh is whether we think it is wiser for us to recommend the budget as it is and hope that we get the revenue that is identified, even though we're not all equally optimistic about getting that, and commit to covering revenue shortfalls if they happen with free cash, if we have to. Or if we think it's wiser to insist on making heavy cuts up front, in the knowledge that those cuts would involve people's jobs and the services that we depend on, and they would be deep and not minor. I would not take such an approach lightly. But that's a serious question on my part. What is the most fiscally responsible approach? I mean, as Councillor Baraka says, we are in the business of providing services. And furthermore, our free cash is meant to help us. Some towns call it the rainy day fund. This is a rainy day. I mean, no question about it, it is. It's raining hard, and we don't know how long the storm is going to last, and we might actually run out of free cash, and then we'll have a different problem. But I'm not sure that it's to our advantage to hoard money right now, even if we know that free cash and the absence of it in our budget is a substantial problem that we might have to contend with in the future. So that right there gets to the crux of the issue as I see it.
Thank you. Councillor Connors.
So Julia, I absolutely agree with you. That is the big question, right? Do we either go do it? Do we, knowing we could be down to less than $2 million in free cash, which is exactly what it's there for, or do we take the hard line and become fiscally responsible ahead of time? I can say that in my history, you know, past, we always prepare for a worst case scenario. So we go in with the minimal. That's how everybody other than government, I think, does to a certain point. You basically, you go in worst case scenario, you come out better in the end, depending on if you get your what ifs, but you always go in with the worst case scenario. So it is a huge question. And I really felt we needed to have these further discussions before we just voted on it, as we had discussed a couple of days ago. And that's what we're doing here. So it's a tough choice, but I would like to review the revised budget and do some final crunch numbers to see. So I would also make a recommendation that we table the vote until either tomorrow night or, as Councilor Sasha said, after capital, depending on if he gets his answers.
Councilor Sasha?
Thank you. I think I agree with what everybody is saying. There is no good answer to this. We're all trying to predict the future. Nobody knows. And I do think, you know, as much as I give you a hard time, Nicole, I appreciate that the mayor came into this with conservative revenue estimates, and he's trying to find a balance between a rock and a hard place that we all know the town is in right now. So I do appreciate that. I think I would just echo what Donna said. Coming from the private sector, you know, things like equipment purchases, we would put that all in reserve funds, right? And we'd say, well, if the revenue comes in, then we'll spend this in 6 months. This manner of budgeting just personally makes me uncomfortable, where you commit to everything up front and you hope for the best. And you know, I know that we have limited ability to cut and not to add. So I'm happy to weigh this budget as it is, but I would like some more time to see the final budget. And I do think that the capital plan and the debt are important factors to me, even if they don't specifically affect the budget items being presented here. Thank you.
So I'm here every night. And I appreciate the thoroughness with which this committee and the thoughtfulness with which this committee is evaluating the numbers. You know, the mayor, Ed, myself, and all of the department heads came into the fiscal 21 budget process with what was already a conservative outlook that got, not necessarily by choice, more conservative as we moved forward into the process. So, you know, we are committed and will continue to be committed to answering every question and hopefully addressing every concern so that we can move together into fiscal 21 with something that we can all support. I just, you know, would reiterate again, as everybody has said, this was not an easy process, but the budget that you have before you, including the recent revisions that were made as we moved through the process, is what we believe is the most fiscally responsible and appropriate way to move the town into 21. And so if there is additional information or questions that myself, Ed Spellman, or any of the department heads can answer, we are absolutely committed to doing that so that everybody has a level of comfort with what we've provided in moving this forward to the full council. So I just, again, if you identify any specific concerns or areas that you would like more information, you know, please just continue to send those along. We are prepared for the following 2 evenings to do capital. We've identified certain departments for each evening. I'm confident that they also, in addition to the written responses, which you'll get at the close of this evening, but I'm confident that they're going to be able to answer and address any of those related concerns that you have, so that you can have a firmer understanding on where we stand with the FY20 proposed capital program, which do fund significant and necessary long-term kind of improvements that the town needs to help improve the way in which we provide services in the community in which our residents call home.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Any other questions, comments from the committee?
Madam Chair, do we have to make a motion to table this now?
Yes.
All right, so it's a motion to table order 20038, and that's, we're tabling it till tomorrow,
Correct.
which
May
is,
20th.
so
May
moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Council Berica,
Yes.
Council Connors,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Council Ryan,
Aye.
Council Sasha.
Yes.
All in favor to table to May 20th.
Okay. I believe that is the last motion for the evening, correct, Sue?
I believe.
Except for this one,
Yes.
motion to
Charlie.
adjourn.
That was my next. Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Council Berica,
Yes.
Council Connors,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Council Ryan,
Aye.
Council Sasha.
Yes.
All in favor to adjourn.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Night.
everybody.
Everyone.